As a teacher, I really like using Google Classroom. And over the last couple years that I've been using it, I've really been excited by not only the features that they've been building in, but the volume of teachers at my school that are also using Google Classroom. I think it's a great tool for our students. However, I have noticed that if we don't use Google Classroom well, it does lead to a little bit of an increase of stress in our students. And I have found that as teachers are communicating in their own ways to our students, both digitally and otherwise, the students are getting overwhelmed with the volume of information that they are flooded with. And so what I decided to do is to come up with a couple tips that could help us teachers reduce the amount of student stress in our students, especially with our use of Google Classroom. So I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to give you 6 tips to reduce student stress when you're using Google Classroom. I hope you find these useful. I think they are quite beneficial and will help your students. So let's start with tip number 1. Tip number 1 is avoid the stream. Avoid the stream. Let's talk about what that means. If you are in Google Classroom, one of the first things that you will find is the stream. It is the very first area that you land in a Google Classroom. So right here is my stream. And what happens is the stream is going to show a stream of all of your posts and notes in your Google Classroom. And at the very top, what you are given is a little text area that allows you to share something with your class. And what I've seen is a lot of teachers utilize the stream to communicate or to disseminate information for their students. When you use the stream, what happens is the students will get a notification that you've posted something to Google Classroom. And although this can be beneficial, one of the main reasons I teach teachers to avoid this area is because not only are the students going to get notified every single time you post something here, but you've also lost the organizational structure for your class when you are posting things here. Now, what does that mean? That means if the students are going to find what it is that you just posted, they have to scroll through the entire stream in order to get it. Now, that's going to be quite lengthy depending on where you're at in your usage of Google Classroom. If it's at the beginning of the year, you may not be very far. But if you are talking about looking at this in April and May, this is going to be very lengthy. And students don't want to have to scroll through here and find bits and pieces of information that you've posted here. So what I generally do is recommend that teachers only use this for announcement type posts. So for example, in some cases, I may have a class that was supposed to have homework. I communicated what that homework was going to be, and then they left my class. But then I realized, you know what? They've got a lot going on. I only want them to finish up to a certain problem. I will communicate that with them through this particular area. So I'm just going to shout out to them, I'm going to share something with them, and I'm going to use this stream in order to share that information. I'm not going to add attachments, I'm not going to add things, I'm just going to send that general information. Other than that, I'm not going to use the stream for anything else. And I think if you avoid the stream and only use it in the manner that I specified, I think you will reduce stress. I've seen a lot of teachers put posts here for every single day, add attachments, and then expect their students to go to the stream and find everything. I've seen teachers share and post several different times a day to the stream. And I think the problem with that is nothing is organized. It's just all in a stream, and then the students have to go searching for different pieces of information. And I think it increases their stress level. And if you think about it, our students are probably dealing with many different Google Classrooms throughout a day. So the more disorganized we are as teachers, the more stress the students are going to have. So that's tip number one, avoid the stream. Now that leads to a very, very good question. If I don't post things in the stream, where do I post things? And that's going to enter in the classwork area. So let's hop over to the classwork area. This is where I recommend teachers post all of their information. And the reason why is not only are the students going to get notified of the things that you post here, but now you have the opportunity to really organize it. And if you've noticed, there's only certain things that you can post in this particular area, or rather I should probably say there are many things that you can post in this area that you can't post in the stream. So this really should be the place that we post most of our information. Okay, so avoid the stream. That's tip number one. Tip number two, use topics. Use topics. Now this is a relatively new feature of Google Classroom. We did not have this in the first couple of years we were using it, so I really, really enjoy the fact that we have topics. Now you may be saying, what in the world is a topic? Well, if you take a look at this very top of my Google Classroom, you see here Remote Learning Days. That's a title of a whole host of posts that I made. And then down here I have VEX IQ Blocks. This is for my robotics class. And then down here I have another title, and then another title, and then another title. And I use these titles to kind of separate different posts that are all related to one another. And I keep them really, really organized. So down at the very bottom, I have a materials topic, and I always put the information that I want my students to have throughout the entire course right down there. There's generally materials, and most of these are links to different aspects of things that we're using in the class or resources for the class. So use topics. It's really easy to create one. All you do is go to create, you create a topic, and it's basically just a section header, and it allows you to move things around and organize different pieces of information within your classwork area. So use topics. It's really, really helpful, especially for kids when they're trying to go find something. If you have everything structured by unit or topic or something of that nature, it's going to be easier for them to spot that topic and then spot the relative post within that topic. So use topics. That's your second tip. Now your third tip is to use material posts for permanent items. Use material posts for permanent items. Many of us have links that our students are supposed to go to. Many of us have resources that our students are just supposed to know how to get to. So right here you can see I have a materials post for my electronic and robotics Google Meet link. All right, so what I've done is I've created a material post, and what I've done is I've added resources or links, files or links, maybe even a video or something, or maybe something in my Google Drive that is going to be for permanent type of items. Now, what do I mean by permanent? I mean things that are going to last throughout your entire class. So I've trained my students, when they need to find links for something, they don't have to memorize them, but they just come down to the classwork area and go to the materials section, and then they will see permanent links for different resources. So here I have my course syllabus, here I have my Socrative room or Socrative room, however you want to pronounce that. I have a pending link for a Khan Academy class. I also have a metric prefix reference. So anything else, I could put my Google Meet link down here, but since we haven't been using that all year, I have it under our Remote Learning Days. So anything that's going to be some kind of a permanent resource that you want your kids to know about or have access to, I would recommend you use materials posts for those and keep them organized. All right, let's go to tip number 4. Tip number 4 is to combine resources in a single post. Now, if I were ranking these tips, this would not be tip number 4, this would be tip number 1. Tip number 1, outside of using the stream, this would be tip number 1. Combine your resources in single posts. Now, what in the world do I mean by that? When you are creating posts for your Google Classroom, you have the option of adding as many different resources to that assignment as you wish. Okay. Now, for example, I have down here, let's see, where was it? Thursday, March 26th, I gave my students an assignment, and I want you to just take a look at this particular assignment here. Now, many of you have created assignments before. You go to create, you click an assignment, and you add something, or you just type some information, and then you post it. Well, what often happens is teachers also have something else that goes along with that assignment. And so they create a new post, and then they have a link, or then they have a video, and they create separate posts for that one particular assignment or for that one particular class. So I want you to take a look here at what I did here. On Thursday, March 26th, I had a class. And you can see here I added several resources to a single post. So I have an assignment post, but inside it I have a video, I have a Google Doc, I also have a link. Now this happens to be a link to a Google Meet where I had it elsewhere, but it could be a link to something else. In this assignment, we have a Google Doc. The students are going to be typing out on this Google Doc, and many of you have used that feature, and I think it's a great feature. Making a copy for each student, great idea. But rather than just assigning the Google Doc and then creating another post with the video and then another post with the link, just put all of that stuff within the same post. So rather than having 4 different posts, or in my case 3 different posts for 3 different pieces of items, or 3 different pieces of information, I have one single post for all 3. Now here's the reason why. Whenever you create a post, the students get notified. So if I created 3 different posts with 3 different pieces of information, what happens is my students get notified 3 different times of those 3 different pieces of information. And then additionally, when they come back, those 3 pieces of information are completely disjoint. They're completely separate from one another. And these resources all have to do with today's assignment. So rather than creating 3 different posts, I'm just going to create one post and add those 3 pieces of information inside the single post. So that way, all the students really need to do is to just come to that one place, and you can have all of those pieces of information accessible from that one post. Now, there are some exceptions to this. When you create a question, that is going to be difficult to kind of put in with some other things. So if you're starting your class with a question, some kind of a motivational question, or you're ending your class with some kind of closure activity where there's a question, that's perfectly fine. You're going to probably have to have some kind of an assignment and then the question. Okay, so try to limit your posts to a single post per day, as much as you possibly can do that. I think that will help reduce student stress. All right, so combine resources in a single post. Tip number 5, use the date in your post title. I have seen a lot of Google Classrooms where there are no topics and there are just links and assignments with no indication as to when the students really need to be worrying about those things. Now, specifically in our COVID days, our remote learning days, it's really important, especially if you're a school that has created some kind of a different school schedule or block scheduling, for the students to really be able to see when things are relevant. So when I come here as a student, I can see, hey, this one's for Monday, April 20th. I know that that information right there is for that particular day. In other days when you're meeting your students in class, it may not be as important and it may not be as necessary, especially if you are keeping your classwork area really organized. But if you're throwing a lot of different things at your students and you're not putting dates on them and you're giving them multiple posts per day, it's going to be really difficult for them to navigate through the classwork area. It's going to be hard for them to find resources. And quite frankly, students are really no different than anybody else. And I've heard a lot of teachers complain about, how do I access this? Where do I get this? This is hard to find. It's really disorganized. Well, think about your own classwork area the same way. How easy is it for students to come find the information? Remember, it's always going to be easiest for you because you were the one that organized the information. You're the one that put the information there. You post it and you probably don't think about it too much later. But your students weren't there when you added it. They need to be able to find things. So make sure you're using those topics, and if you can, pre-pend your post with the date. I think that's going to be really, really helpful for most students when you're posting assignments for their daily work. All right, and let's go on to tip number 6. This is my 6th tip, and this is probably in a level of importance. This is tip number 3. So this is the 3rd best tip I could possibly give you, but I'm leaving it to the end because it comes after some of those other topics. Schedule your posts. Now, what am I talking about here? When you go to create something, let's say I'm creating an assignment for tomorrow. Tomorrow just so happens to be Tuesday, April 21st. I'm just going to say today's assignment. This is not a great title. I got it. Go away. All right. So this is not a great title. I'm going to come back here and make it a little bit more specific. But once you've added all of your resources, and remember, you're going to add multiple resources to this assignment if you have them. So if you're having your kids watch a couple YouTube videos, post them all here. If you have an Edpuzzle assignment, post it here. If you've got a link to something that you want them to read, post it here. Put all of your resources for this particular assignment right here. All right. Once you're done with that and you've done all of your other settings, you've created a due date, you've added it to a particular topic. By the way, if you do use topics, you have the ability to put different assignments under these topics. Okay. If you forget, it's okay. You can drag and drop them later. But before you go and assign it, drop this little area down here, and instead of assign, go to schedule. Now, what I love about scheduling is a couple different things. Now, the first thing is it prevents me from having to post again. So, for example, I'm a teacher, but I'm a human being, and I forget things. So what happens sometimes is if I don't use the schedule and I just go click assign, I might come back 5 minutes later, an hour later, and realize, oh, I forgot to do this. I forgot to put this, or maybe this was a mistake. If you schedule your posts, you are going to save yourself from having to clarify, from having to edit, from having to delete, from having to add additional posts to cover what you forgot, because it gives you just this draft and it's not going to be sent to students until the designated time. So, for example, I have a class. This class is going to meet at 12:35 tomorrow. So I'm going to schedule this assignment for 12:30 tomorrow, 5 minutes before class starts. 12:35 is, I think, it's when it starts. So I'm going to schedule this for right before class. Now, what that does is it gives me all of today to figure out if there's anything else that I needed to add to this. It also gives me the ability tomorrow to come back to this and edit anything before it's actually sent to the students. So that's really a great benefit to me, and it reduces the student stress, because if I do forget something, now I don't have to add a second post. Now I don't have to clarify. Now I don't have to do anything else. They're just going to get the same post. Now, do I make mistakes even after it's scheduled and it gets sent? Sure, that happens. But let's try to reduce the amount of stress as much as we possibly can ahead of time. By scheduling your posts for right before the class, it gives you the ability to revisit that later and edit it for anything that you forgot. Now, there's the other benefit. The next benefit is when I schedule it, the students are not going to see it until the scheduled date and time. Now, I think that's really beneficial to your students, because you don't want to be flooding their inbox with things that aren't relevant at a particular time. We're all teachers using Google Classroom. You know as well as I do what happens when you get emails about things that are not relevant right now. Something that is relevant for a week from now, or 2 weeks from now, or a couple days from now. What happens? You click on them, you realize it's not for now, you're too busy, you don't want to read it, you throw it away. And then all of a sudden, you can't remember where it was. Or now, if you're a Google school, you can use that snooze feature, which is really awesome, because now what I can do is I can snooze it for when it's going to be relevant. It doesn't have to be sitting there in my inbox, taking up space, making me think about something that I don't have the time to worry about right now. And additionally, then I don't have to go back and try and find it. So if it's for a day from now or 2 days from now, why am I giving it to the students now? Why do I have to alert them to something that is not relevant to them? So I think we can reduce their stress by not giving them information that they don't have to worry about yet. So my students are not going to need to see anything about this assignment until right before class tomorrow. So I might as well just schedule it for right before class tomorrow. And that way, when they come to class, or if they're checking on things right before class, they'll see that assignment a couple minutes beforehand and they'll have it at the appropriate time. All right, so that's tip number 6. Schedule your posts. All right, let's run through these tips one more time real quick. Tip number 1, avoid the stream. Don't use the stream. Avoid it at all cost. Keep your posts in the classwork area and keep your posts organized. Tip number 2, use topics. Those are your section headers, your unit areas, whatever you want to use it for. Use topics and put relevant posts within those topics. 3, use material posts for permanent items. If you've got permanent links, permanent resources that you want your students to go to, just create a material post for those things and put them in an organized place in your classwork area. Tip 4, combine resources into a single post. One of the most important tips I can ever give you. When you're creating posts, creating assignments, creating materials, put multiple resources inside that single post, especially if they are all relevant. 5. Tip 5, use the date in the post title. Not as important as many of the other tips, but really, really important. Make sure that you use the date in the post title so that students know specifically for assignments for what day something was relevant. And then tip number 6, one of the best tips I can give you, or the top 3 tips I can give you, is schedule your posts. This is going to be for you and your students. Gives you time to edit them and come back to them later, and reduces the amount of worry about things that are not relevant at a given time for your students. All right, so I hope that helps you out. I hope you enjoy using Google Classroom. I would encourage you to continue to use Google Classroom. If you're not yet, dig into it, figure out how you can use it to your advantage and to your students' advantage, but make sure you use it well, because if we don't use these tools well, they will increase our students' stress, and that is not good for anybody.